Thank you for that lovely welcome. It was so lovely. How was I associated?
How did it come about?
How long have we got?
I wish we had more time. A few minutes.
Well, it was such a long story, but in 1951 I started doing television, and people of Hammer Films saw me doing 3 years of television and wanted me very much to do a picture for them. But I was tied up for 3 years. When that 3 years was over, I heard they were to make The Curse of Frankenstein. And I said I'd love to do it, and I did, and here I am.
It was the first major one, really, since 31. Colin Clive, did he do it?
Yeah.
How many roles have you played in that particular area?
I played Frankenstein 7 times.
You played Frankenstein 7 times?
Because 1, 2 haven't come out yet. Well, no, I think they've got used to me now. But strange enough, I've never really seen old Frankie as a baddie. So I think there's a famous Dr. Robert Knox, the anatomist. He was a real chap. He only had one good eye, and he used to close that to how Burke and Hare got in the cadavers to work on, because rather like a garage mechanic, he's got to be able to open up the bonnet and see how it works to put the car right. Well, Dr. Robert Knox felt the same about the human body. You had to open it up to see how it worked, to put it right again. And without going too deep, I always sort of base Frankenstein rather upon that character, because otherwise he's just a chap doing it for kicks, or like a do-it-yourself plastic merchant. That's how I think. But he's always up against the villagers or the ignorant, you see.
Yes.
So he has to be rather ruthless in his approach to how he gets on with his dedication. That's how I play.
There's something I want to ask you. There's a story of my staff that I've got to ask you about a time in your life when, Peter, you donated blood. Can you tell the story?
You have done your homework, my dear, yes. Gosh, it's another long, boring story. To do my best. I was in America. I went over there. Always wanted to go where Tom Mix lived, you see. That dates me. And I popped off to America after about 4 or 5 years in repertory in England. And soon after I got there, I got fearfully homesick because war had broken out. I didn't want to come back and join up and fight, because I'm not really the fighting type, but I did want to be home. You know how one feels. So it took me 18 months in all to get from Hollywood back to Liverpool, actually, not far from here. And on my way, I stopped off in New York because I had no money, and I had to somehow get some more. And I was walking along one of the side streets, and I saw a hospital, give blood for Britain. Well, I'd give anything for Britain. It's all I had to give. So I went in and said, here's a pint, which they took. And I walked out, fell flat on my face, was carried in again, and they had to put 2 in me. So
you gave 1 and took 2.
Yes, my war effort was stayed there for about 4.
There is a scene, and our time has gone just too fast, but there's a scene from the House That Dripped Blood, in which you, and of course it was an anthology, and I believe we're going to roll it in just a moment. We've got to see this. Here we go.
I hadn't been there for a long time, but I think I was so lucky, having always wanted to go. I went in 1939, and it was right at its peak. Mind you, I was absolute unknown. No one knew except my mother, bless her. But it was a wonderful experience, because I found it rather like life on board a boat. It was such a small community. You saw everybody. I mean, these marvelous images from the screen which you never thought were real. You gazed at the night police, you know. And it was so wonderful to see them just walking about the street, because you were allowed to walk in Hollywood in those days. I don't think you are now, are you? But I should think it's changed enormously, because it's a long time ago, my dear, before you were born.
Well, Peter, would you like to try something? Like to try an experiment?
I'm yours.
You don't know what I'm going to do with these cards. We hadn't told you, but Peter, it's a simple experiment in principle, and with it I'm going to have a bit of fun. I'm going to take out of the deck the King of Hearts, first of all, and I think a 3. Yes, a 3 of spades. Now, one could almost equate this, Peter, with tossing a $50 or an English penny in the air. We'll use here 3 of spades, and I'll tell you why I used the king, because I felt it would be good contrast, the red and the black. And here I have a king of hearts. Now, Peter, the 3 of spades and of the king of hearts, all I want you to do is to think of one of those cards, either the 3 of spades or the king of hearts. Say nothing, just think of one of those cards. And I'm going to take my wallet, and I just propose to drop it on the one you're thinking of, which of course is only 2 cards. Is that the one you were thinking of?
It was indeed.
You were thinking of that. All right, let's try that again, Peter. Because someone could say, well, it's a 50-50 chance, and I agree, no question about it. Think of either the 3 of spades or the king of hearts. Kind of.
Right again.
I'm right again.
Yes.
You thought of it a second time. Now the odds begin to rise. Think of either the 3 of spades or the king of hearts. And of course, when I'm wrong, tell me, but when I'm right, I wasn't sure that time. You were thinking of the king. All right, now don't agree just to make me feel good. This time think of either the 3 of spades or the king of hearts. This could be wrong this time. I perhaps should have gone over there. Now you tell me honestly, even though you thought of the king of hearts the first 3 times, what card were you thinking of this time?
King of hearts.
You thought of it again. That is very interesting. Now I must show you what's going to happen, all right, 4 times in a row, and don't make me feel good now, Peter. I'll do this deliberately. Which card were you thinking of?
King of hearts.
You thought of it again. Now, let me show you one more thing, because obviously I've conditioned Peter to think in a certain way. This time, Peter, you think of either the 3 of spades or the king of hearts. Reach your hand forward and tap the card you're thinking of, because I'm not going to guess this time. You tap the card you're thinking of with your right hand.
Anytime now?
Yeah, just tap one of the cards. You thought of the king of hearts. Now, Peter, do me a favor, change your mind and tap what would be an error on my part. If I were to misguess the card you're thinking of, I would make an error by tapping which card? Which one? This one?
No.
Were you thinking of the 3 of spades?
No.
You're thinking of that. All right, now, sir, think of the 3 of spades. Just think of the 3 of spades and watch. I'll put my hand here. I've never approached the 3 of spades. You have been thinking of the 3 of spades, haven't you, Peter?
Mm-hmm.
I thought we'd have some fun. Look.
That is...
Turn over that card, Peter. You know, folks, I've done something tonight rather unorthodox with Peter Cushing, and I think it's because of the wide scope of this gentleman's work and the tremendous possibilities and thought. I asked, and I rarely do this, but I met Peter before the program and asked him if he would prepare a thought. Usually I don't have anyone write it down, but I had him do it this time because I wanted him to cover the entire scope of his life, a thought of some significance in his life. I pointed out that it could deal with names, roles, numbers, addresses. But Peter, I think the most important thing of all, would you admit that I did not suggest a specific area?
Never. No, not one word, dear boy.
And you didn't discuss this with anyone at all?
No.
Now, what I did do, and I rarely will have someone write anything down unless it's to impress something on their mind, all I gave Peter was, I think, a blue piece of paper and a pen and an envelope, and I left the room.
You did.
You didn't have any special pads or clipboards which could have hidden carbon paper. There was nothing like this. He did this on his own. Peter, do you have the envelope on you? Now, there are ashes here, and I do this as a tribute to a man who has created a macabre feeling, which really is an art, because the macabre stimulates the imagination. It is sealed. I'm going to ask you, Peter, the window side is there towards you. I'm going to ask you on camera, if you will, because I don't want to handle the envelope, and we have an ashtray which is filled with ashes. You'll never know the extent our staff went in collecting ashes. There's no one here, by the way, Peter. I'm going to ask you...
If you smoke it.
I just said, would you burn the envelope and lay it in the ashtray as it consumes so that you don't harm yourself in any way?
Right now, my dear?
Yeah, right now. I'm going to take my jacket off. It'll be very evident shortly why. We'll set it here on the floor, and we'll just let it become consumed, and as it does burn, so that you don't harm yourself, and your message, which I can, obviously, the corner of, will lower it into the tray.
Is that one of those detectives?
Yes, and don't hurt yourself, Peter, whatever you do.
I'm used to fire.
Yeah, you're used to fire. Yes, there have been many scenes, I think, when you've been helped to destroy the modern Prometheus, Frankenstein. But your message is being destroyed now because I think you had it towards the middle of the envelope. Now I'm going to ask you, Peter, if you will, you've heard of, I think, sir, stigmata, which has had many connotations in the days of the Salem trials. It was described as the raising of blood. It has connotations religiously, which I won't go into because my religion is important in my life. But it's always been a strange phenomenon of the raising of blisters on the flesh and what have you. Peter, would you concentrate, please, on this incident? I'm rolling my sleeve back. Peter, I must tell you I'm confused. It seems to me this is not a role you played, is it, sir? Yes, it seems to me there's something to deal with numbers, and yet I don't feel it's an address. I feel it's perhaps a date. Would it be a date?
Yes.
A date you met someone? Not an actor? No, perhaps, but not known as an actor. The year is in the 40s. It's either 42 or 43. The month is July. Am I correct? Well, the year is which, 42 or 43?
42.
42. Peter, would you clasp my wrist, please? I'm going to ask you, just the outside of my hand, without placing, to concentrate on the name. Now, sir, it is a lady. Ah, Peter, the way you've described it, it is your wife. Peter, would you take the ashes in your hand and just place them on my arm with your other hand? These ashes here, just place them on my arm. Are they hot?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Maybe you can scoop some on, or you can just pour them. The lower ones are cool. Just place them all the way across my arm, if you will. In fact, we might just, if it does not,
hot.
we have to, yeah. Take your hand away now. If you will concentrate, yes, it is hot. It is very warm. Concentrate on the name. The name, Peter. First name is Helen. Am I correct? Would you take your hand and rub the ashes into my flesh, please, as hard as you can. Into my flesh. Here, down further, please, Peter, if you will. And down, move down, and folks, an H is coming through. If you can now do it over my hand. I don't think we had a bit of response. Wait, I'll tell you what's happened, folks. The ashes, will just leave this as it is. I think, Peter, you will agree, the ashes are so warm, but if you will read the next letter, which seems to be coming through, which is what?
E.
The H is there, the E is there, and I'll tell you, folks, I am so darkened now that I don't think we can aim for the rest of the name, but I think in significance, we got the H, and we got the E, and obviously it would allude to Helen inevitably. We couldn't get it more perfect, but it certainly succeeded, Peter, to some degree. I could not go any further. Peter, I could not get it any further. Do you have any comment?
Well, my dear fellow, it wouldn't matter less whether it came on there or not. For you to know that is quite fantastic.
I must say one more thing in concluding. I became a little bit saddened, but it has been beautiful. Your wife is deceased, and I know that it was a life of great joy and happiness
But I
between
shall
you.
be with her again.